The story of Job, a journey of faith. In the ancient lands of the East, there lived a man named Job, a man of great faith, wisdom, and integrity.
He was known for his kindness, his justice, and his devotion to God. Job's blessings.
Job was the wealthiest man in the land. He owned 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 yoke of oxen, 500 donkeys, and had a household so large that he was known as the greatest of all men in the East. His home was filled with laughter, music, and the joy of family. His children feasted together often, celebrating the goodness of life. Job's faithfulness. Whenever his sons and daughters finished feasting, Job would rise early in the morning and offer burnt offerings to God for each of them, saying, "Perhaps my children have sinned and cursed God in their hearts." Thus Job continually sought to please the Lord in all things. A heavenly conversation. Far above, in the realms unseen, the angels gathered before the throne of God, and among them came Satan. God asked, "Have you considered my servant Job? There is no one like him on earth, blameless and upright." But Satan replied, "Does Job fear God for nothing? You've blessed the work of his hands. Take away what he has, and he will surely curse you to your face." And the Lord said, "Very well. Everything he has is in your power, but do not lay a hand on the man himself." The test begins. Soon after, disaster struck like a storm from nowhere. A servant ran to Job, trembling, saying, "The oxen were plowing and the donkeys were grazing nearby when the Sabaeans attacked and carried them off." Before he finished speaking, another messenger arrived. "Fire from heaven fell and burned up the sheep and the servants." And another came. "The Chaldeans formed 3 bands and took your camels." Then the final blow. "Your sons and daughters were feasting in their oldest brother's house. When a mighty wind struck the 4 corners, the house collapsed, and they are gone." Job's grief. Silence fell. Job tore his robe and fell to the ground in deep sorrow, and yet he worshipped. He said, "Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I shall depart. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord." Satan's second challenge. Once again, in the heavens, Satan appeared before God. He said, "Skin for skin. A man will give all he has for his own life. Strike his flesh, and he will curse you." The Lord replied, "He is in your hands, but you must spare his life." Job's suffering. Painful boils broke out on Job's skin from head to toe. He sat among the ashes, scraping himself with a piece of pottery. His wife, filled with despair, said, "Do you still hold fast to your integrity? Curse God and die." But Job replied softly, "Shall we accept good from God and not trouble?" Job's friends arrive. 3 of Job's friends, Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar, came to comfort him. When they saw him from afar, they could hardly recognize him. They wept aloud, tore their robes, and sat with him on the ground for 7 days and 7 nights. No one spoke a word, for they saw that his grief was very great. Job speaks his heart. At last, Job opened his mouth. He cried, "May the day of my birth perish. Why is life given to those in misery? His voice trembled with pain, yet deep within his sorrow, his faith still flickered like a fragile flame. Even in despair, Job did not curse God. He only sought to understand. Eliphaz speaks. Eliphaz, the eldest, broke the silence. Job, you've instructed many and strengthened weak hands. But now trouble comes to you and you faint. Who, being innocent, ever perished? Job listened, his eyes filled with sorrow. Eliphaz believed Job must have sinned for such tragedy to come. But Job's heart whispered, I have done no wrong. Job answers. With trembling voice, Job replied, If only my grief could be weighed, it would outweigh the sand of the seas. I have no strength left. I cry out to God, yet I find no answer. But still, he clung to faith, even in the darkness. Bildad's accusation. Bildad spoke sharply. Does God pervert justice? If your children sinned against him, he gave them what they deserved. His words cut deep, like a blade into Job's already broken heart. But Job answered gently, How can a mortal be righteous before God? He moves mountains without their knowing, Zophar condemns. Zophar, the third friend, spoke harshly. God has even forgotten some of your sin. If you would just repent, your life would shine again. But Job raised his voice, filled with pain and conviction. Indeed, I know that my Redeemer lives, and in the end, he will stand upon the earth. Those words echoed with eternal hope, even amid ashes. Job's lament alone under the dark sky, Job cried out, Have pity on me, my friends, for the hand of God has struck me. Why do you pursue me as God does? When will my suffering end? But no comfort came, only silence, less than greater than the mystery of God's ways. Job stared into the distance, the stars glimmering above. He whispered, He knows the way that I take. When he has tested me, I shall come forth as gold. Even in pain, Job's faith stood like a flame against the wind. Job's friends grow angry. Frustration rose among his friends. Their voices grew louder, their words harsher. They accused him again and again, saying, Surely the wicked are punished, and the righteous are blessed. But Job answered, Why do the wicked live on, growing old and increasing in power? He struggled to understand, but refused to curse God. Job's cry to heaven. Job fell to his knees beneath the stormy sky. He lifted his face to heaven and cried, Oh, that I had someone to plead my case before God. My witness is in heaven. My advocate is on high. Even when his world crumbled, Job believed that God still saw him. The silence before the storm days turned to nights, and Job's body grew weaker. His heart was weary, but his spirit refused to break. The friends sat again in silence. The desert wind howled, and heaven watched. Little did Job know, God was preparing an answer that would shake the earth. Job declares his faith. Through tears and dust, Job stood once more. He lifted his trembling hands and proclaimed, I know that my Redeemer lives, and that in the end he will stand upon the earth. And though my flesh be destroyed, yet in my body I shall see God. A divine strength filled his voice, the sound of unbreakable faith. Job looks to the heavens. The sky burned with crimson light as the sun sank. Job gazed upward and whispered, "Even if he slays me, yet will I trust in him." He could not see God, but he refused to let go of hope. The friends grow restless. The friends began to argue among themselves. Their certainty crumbled, their words tangled in confusion. Each tried to explain God's mystery, yet none could grasp it. The air grew heavy, as if heaven itself waited in silence. Elihu appears. A younger man named Elihu had been listening all along. He rose in righteous passion and spoke with fire. "I am young, but the spirit within me compels me to speak. God is greater than man. He does no wrong. He speaks through pain to turn us from destruction." His voice thundered across the barren land, a glimpse of truth cutting through despair. Elihu's revelation. As he spoke, the wind began to stir. The desert trembled. Elihu lifted his face to the darkening sky and declared, "Behold, God's voice is like the rolling thunder. He commands the lightning and causes the rain to fall." The clouds swirled, lightning flashed. Something divine was coming. The storm builds. The sky blackened. Winds howled through the desert. Job shielded his eyes as dust and thunder filled the air. "Do you hear it?" Elihu shouted. "God's voice, speaking from the whirlwind." The ground shook as the storm of heaven descended. The whirlwind appears. Lightning split the sky. A mighty whirlwind spiraled before Job, radiant with divine light and roaring power. The friends fell to the ground in awe. Then, out of the storm, came the voice of the Almighty. "Who is this that darkens counsel with words without knowledge?" The very sound made the mountains tremble. "God speaks!" The voice thundered again. "Where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? Tell me if you have understanding. Who shut up the sea behind doors when it burst forth from the womb?" The storm danced with light as creation itself seemed to bow before its creator. The majesty of God. Have you commanded the morning since your days began? Do you give the horse its strength? Do you clothe its neck with thunder? The voice rolled like waves of eternity. Job fell to his face in the dust, trembling before the Almighty. He finally understood. God's wisdom was beyond all measure. The voice of creation. The storm glowed with unearthly light as the voice of God continued. "Can you bind the chains of the Pleiades? Can you loosen Orion's belt? Do you send lightning bolts on their way? Do they report to you and say, 'Here we are'?" The universe seemed to pulse with his power, stars, storms, and beasts all bowing before their maker. God's wisdom over creation. Do you give the horse its might, or clothe its neck with a flowing mane? Does the hawk take flight by your wisdom? Each question struck Job's soul like thunder. He realized the Creator ruled not just heaven, but every heartbeat of life itself. Job's heart trembles. Job fell to his knees, shaking under the weight of truth. He whispered, his voice breaking, "Behold, I am unworthy. What shall I answer you?" I lay my hand upon my mouth. Tears mixed with dust. The proud man of us became a humble child before God. God speaks again. But the whirlwind thundered once more. "Brace yourself like a man. I will question you, and you shall answer me. Do you have an arm like God's? Can your voice thunder like mine?" Flashes of lightning surrounded Job as the divine words filled the heavens. The behemoth. "Behold the behemoth which I made as I made you. He eats grass like an ox. His strength is in his loins, his power in the muscles of his belly." A mighty shadow rose from the reeds, a creature beyond imagination. The earth shook beneath its steps, yet it obeyed the voice of its creator. The Leviathan. Can you draw out Leviathan with a hook? Can you put a rope through his nose? He makes the depths churn like a boiling cauldron. Nothing on earth is his equal, a creature without fear. Firelight and sea mist swirled as the monstrous form of Leviathan twisted in the waves, a symbol of power only God could command. Job's realization. As the thunder faded, Job lifted his face, his eyes filled with tears of awe. "I know that you can do all things, and that no purpose of yours can be thwarted. I have uttered what I did not understand, things too wonderful for me to know." A gentle wind replaced the storm. The voice of God became soft, tender, merciful. Job repents. Job fell upon his face in the dust and cried out, "My ears had heard of you, but now my eyes have seen you. Therefore I repent in dust and ashes." He bowed low, not in sorrow alone, but in peace, for he finally understood. The silence after the storm. The skies cleared. The sun broke through the clouds. Job's friends stood speechless, trembling in shame. The whirlwind was gone, replaced by divine calm. God's presence lingered like the warmth of dawn after a long night. God defends Job. Then the Lord said to Eliphaz the Temanite, "My anger burns against you and your friends, for you have not spoken the truth about me as my servant Job has." The heavens rumbled softly as God continued, "Take 7 bulls and 7 rams, go to my servant Job, and offer a burnt offering for yourselves." Job would pray for them, and God would accept his prayer. Job forgives. The friends approached humbly, their faces lowered in shame. Job looked upon them, not with bitterness, but mercy. He prayed earnestly for them, his voice trembling, asking God to forgive their folly and restore their peace. The turning point. As Job prayed for others, light broke across the sky. The wind grew warm, a whisper from heaven. God began to restore all that was lost. The curse turned to blessing, sorrow to song. Double blessing. The Lord blessed the latter days of Job more than his beginning. He had 14,000 sheep, 6,000 camels, 1,000 yoke of oxen, and 1,000 donkeys. The sound of laughter filled his fields once more. His barns overflowed, his wells sparkled in the sun. New life and family. Job's heart rejoiced as he held his new sons and daughters. He named his daughters Jemimah, Keziah, and Karen Happuch, their beauty unmatched in all the land. He gave them inheritance beside their brothers, showing grace and love that mirrored his Creator's heart. Peace in old age. Years passed like golden sunsets. Job sat beneath the shade of olive trees, watching his grandchildren play in joy. The same man who once wept in ashes now smiled in peace. He had learned that faith isn't proven by ease, but by endurance, legacy of faith. Job lived 140 years and saw his children's children to the fourth generation. When his final day came, he closed his eyes, not in pain, but in rest, wrapped in God's everlasting love. The skies glowed softly, and heaven received a faithful servant. Moral of the story: even when life breaks you, when friends doubt you and storms rage without mercy, remember Job. Faith may be tested, but it can never be destroyed. God's love never forgets those who remain steadfast in heart. Closing message. As the camera pans over a radiant sunrise, the narrator's voice grows hopeful and warm. The story of Job reminds us that even through pain, God restores what was lost and gives back double. If you want to see more amazing Bible story videos like this, don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe
For more faith-filled 3D animated stories that inspire the heart.
because faith isn't about what we lose. It's about who we trust.
When all was gone, he still believed. In silence deep, he would not leave. Though storm and sorrow filled his day, he bowed his heart and chose to pray. Through every trial, through every flame, God never left, he knew his name. From dust to joy, from loss to grace, Job saw the mercy on God's face. In whispers soft, the Lord replied, with stars and storms across the sky. And in the end, with love restored, Job walked in peace with God once more. Through every trial, through every flame, God never left, he knew his name. From dust to joy, from loss to grace, Job saw the mercy on God's face. When all was gone, he still believed. In silence deep, he would not leave. his heart and chose to pray. Through every trial, through every flame, God never left, he knew his name. From dust to joy, from loss to grace, Job saw the mercy on God's face. In whispers soft, the Lord replied, with stars and storms across the sky. And in the end, with love restored, Job walked in peace with God once more.